I want to share a story of my life, how I became a photographer from an engineering student. 13 years ago, I used to visit a store, a camera store in Connaught Place, Delhi. And whenever I used to visit that store, I would often use and try my hands on the cameras stores available in that particular store. So I used to see the work of many photographers in in the magazine of Canon India. And when I used to see those pictures, I always dreamed that one day probably I will be a photographer and my work will be featured in one of these magazines and my name will be written with the pictures, because in that magazine there were so many Canon ambassadors whose pictures they shared in the magazine. So whenever I used to see the pictures, I always had a dream, and at that time I was pursuing engineering. I don't know how many of you know about me. I am basically a civil engineer turned photographer. So when I used to see those pictures, I dreamed one day probably I'll be representing a brand or or my work will be featured in that magazine. And right after that, I almost quit visiting that store because my college was in another city that was nearly 20 kilometers away from Delhi. It was in Ghaziabad. But my journey began. I ended up studying engineering. I completed my engineering in 2013. And then after 2013, I became a photographer. I'll tell you the story how I became a photographer. But after 9 years of that incident, I told you, when I used to visit that camera store, 9 years later, I received a call from a brand that I always love and I always like, and I always use that camera since the beginning I started photography. And there was a lady on the other side of phone, and she asked, "Hey, are you Abba? Am I calling with Abba?" I said, "Yes, I'm Abba." She said, "We have an offer for you. Would you like to be associated with a brand, with a camera brand?" That was a huge thing for me. I said, "Definitely, I would love to." So I thought it might be like, I didn't know that it was a big brand like Canon India. So it was a call from Canon India. So she said, "We are from Canon and we want you to be associated with our brand." So that thing happened and I was totally shocked, and I was flying. That was a huge thing in my career. And that's how I started representing Canon India. Today, it's been 5 years since I associated with the brand, and currently I am their ambassador and I take workshops in different cities, colleges, universities. I've been here 1 year back. I don't know how many of you actually attended, but some of the photography club members attended my workshop over here. Okay, so this is my story about becoming ambassador of a brand, but you might be thinking how I ended up a photographer from an engineering student. So I will start from my story. I grew up in a tiny village of Uttar Pradesh named Sathni. It's nearly 100 kilometers away from Delhi. And when I was growing in my village, I had big dreams because there was limited access to see the outside world. I didn't know many things about big cities. I used to only see those places in the books or newspapers. But I always dreamed. And not only that, I always had interest towards art and literature, because the family I grew up in, my father, he is a Urdu teacher, and I used to study and I used to read poems, poetry, and literature of many Urdu poets. So that's how I started developing my interest towards art and literature. But when I passed my school, my father wanted me to be an engineer. And to be honest, I didn't have many idea about the career choices, what to do after school, because as I told you that I grew up in a small village and there was not so many uh, there was not so much of exposure where I could have the career choices or where I could think of other career choices other than engineering. But not in my village, the literacy rate is quite high. It's like it's a village, but the literacy rate is quite high. But in my village, there are people who are mostly government teachers, or some of the families have engineers. So I had two options only. Either I would become a teacher, government teacher. My father is also a government teacher, or I would become an engineer. I had no choices for the literature and art, so I said, okay, I want to be an engineer. So my father thanked me. My parents sent me to an engineering college in Ghaziabad. It's near to Delhi only, and I started studying engineering over there. But when I studied engineering, to be honest, I never had that interest in the machines or the formulas. I was studying, and let me tell you one thing as well. I was a very bright student till my school. Like, I used to be a topper, so everyone had expectations from me that I'm gonna be a great engineer or a great inventor. I'm gonna, I'm gonna, you know, I'm gonna be top of the engineering. I am gonna be a top student of engineering colleges. So that's how my journey began. But after can you get? Okay. So after 2 years, when I when after 2 years of engineering, I was just studying, and one day I went to Jamia Millia Islamia. It's a central university in Delhi. I don't know if you have heard the name. So Jamia Millia Islamia, it's actually a good university for the art and literature. There were some of my friends who were studying art over there. So I started visiting often that university in second year of my college, and that how I started developing interest towards photography. There were some friends of mine who used to go to photo walk, so I started taking their camera, I started borrowing their camera and go to photo walk, sometimes alone, sometimes with them. And then as year passed, I came in third year of my college. Now I had totally made up my mind that I'm gonna be a photographer after engineering, but I didn't tell my parents because I knew that if I tell my parents about this, so this will be a disaster. So I had no courage, but as I came in fourth year of my college, I gave an entrance in Jamia Millia Islamia and somehow got selected. And when I got selected, I thought I'm not gonna be selected, so let's try. But you can say I was lucky or fortunately, I got selected, and my career began from Jamia Millia Islamia in 2014. In 2013, I completed my engineering. I came to Jamia and studying photography for a year. But during that time, in the beginning, when I got selected in Jamia, I didn't tell my parents that I got selected because they had expectations from me. They wanted me to be an engineer and they wanted me to do an engineering job, but I had no interest in that, so I didn't tell my parents. And I gave my fee. I borrowed some money from one of my cousins and submitted my fee and started studying. When my parents got to know about it, they were a little upset, but I couldn't help it because I was really stubborn at the time and I thought, no, I'm not gonna be an engineer. So I started studying over there. Can I get the key? So it was 2020 when I got a call, as I told you, when I became Kenyan Indian influencer. 29th September, it was 29th September. I know this might be a little thing for the people, but for me it was a dream. It was a lifelong dream that fulfilled. And the journey we are talking about. So I don't know if you can recognize, this is me on the left in my engineering college, and this is also me with the glasses during my engineering time. I used to do this only, like going college and roaming around with friends, because I told you that I had not so much interest in engineering. This is me also when I started going photo walk with the friends. So one of my friends clicked that picture, and for me it was a great picture of that time. And after when I got into photography and started practicing photography, so I used to borrow camera from my friends, and I used to go to monuments and streets in Delhi, and I click pictures. So this is our batch of Jamia Millia Islamia when I got into that course. This is one of our exhibitions in the college, and this is me with my picture in 2013. Okay, so when I completed engineering and studied photography over a year, so the main journey began from 2014 actually, because I only took admission in photography, but I had no camera gear, I had no money in my pocket. I didn't have much idea because there was no one who could guide me. So I started rent, taking equipments on rent in Delhi, and I used to shoot weddings. And that was not very easy actually. I could get only one or two assignments in a month, and then I used to shoot weddings, earn some money, and spend whole month with that money that I earned in one with the one assignment. So this is one of the pictures from my wedding shoot. I used to shoot weddings, anything I could get at that time, like weddings, engagement, or birthday celebrations, portfolios, anything to earn money. So in 2016, I bought my very first camera with the help, of course, with the help of my father, because in the beginning of 3 years, I couldn't get much money to buy a camera. But because there were not so many opportunities over there today in this time, like there are so many opportunities in photography. You could be an editor, you can shoot reels for the people, you can post your work online. So there was no Instagram or Facebook, like people didn't post their work over Instagram or Facebook at that time. So I didn't have much opportunities to earn money, but that's how I started taking wedding assignments. So anything I could get over there. So when I started in 2016, I got my first camera and started shooting wedding and other events. So slowly I started getting some money and I started going out, like traveling. As I went to my very first tour to Pushkar. It's in Rajasthan.